Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to yet another edition of our EQ Lunch and Learn. My name is Mucha Mlingo, and I am delighted to be your host for yet another great conversation. We're talking today about psychological safety, how to unlock your team's potential. Success, as we know, is not driven by technical expertise alone, but by how teams connect, how they collaborate, and how individuals feel safe to share their voices. Psychological safety is about creating an environment where people can speak up, take risks, share ideas, and even admit mistakes without fear, embarrassment, or worrying about retribution. It is the foundation for trust, for innovation, and for high performing teams. As always, I am privileged to have a dynamic and, truly diverse panel with us today. And I'm looking forward to really hearing from them. I have a senior people and culture advisor bringing in the perspective of HR. We have a thought leader and consultant who works directly with organizations to shape leadership and culture. And we have a clinical psychologist offering a deep dive into the mental and emotional dimensions of safety at work. And together, we are going to explore what psychological safety really means, why it matters, and most importantly, how we can build and sustain it in our organizations. So get ready for a conversation that really blends practice, leadership insight, and psychological expertise with actionable strategies you can take back to your team. So let's get started with some introductions. I have told you already that I have a really great panel, and I am delighted to have them here. Allow me to begin by bringing on Maureen Chege, a dear friend of PTS. She is an experienced learning and development professional who specializes in designing and delivering impactful learning programs that drive individual growth, elevate organizational performance, and foster a culture of continuous learning. She has a very robust bio, considering what I would say. I'm sure you can all gauge as her age. But to learn more about Maureen and her expertise, you can connect with her on LinkedIn. She currently serves at Zamara, Kenya, where she really supports the learning and development. She's also the founder of Thrive Lab, a platform dedicated to understanding the evolving needs of the new generation workforce, as well as equipping both young professionals and business leaders to thrive in today's competitive business landscape. Maureen, it is awesome to have you here with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. Please say hello to our guests.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Mucha. Thank you once again for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this conversation on psychological safety.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Maureen. Let me finish with the ladies for today. I'm going to introduce to you Pendo Ochola, a hospital psychologist. She has experience practicing psychology in a clinical setting and is passionate about awareness creation and advocacy on matters mental health, both in digital and face-to-face forums. She is the founder of Bole Digital, a digital strategy consultancy that allows individuals and organizations to utilize emerging digital opportunities to meet their specific needs. If you want to connect with Pendo, learn more about her, you can find her on LinkedIn. Pendo, thank you very much for joining us today. Welcome to the session.
Thank you so much, Misha, for having me. This is such an honor, and this is a much needed conversation. So I'm glad to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us. And last but definitely not least, allow me to bring the gentleman who is going to add the gentleman's voice to the conversation. Is a friend of PTS again, David's personal vision. is to be a global coach on abundant living. And this is something that's not just theoretical. It's something that really makes up who David Sijeni is. He uses business as a tool to alleviate poverty and lift people out of financial trouble. He's a certified professional coach accredited by the International Coach Federation. He is also a gold coach with Noble Manhattan Coaching of the United Kingdom. He is a financial growth coach in the transformation program, Straightforward Financial Growth, and is working towards his leadership coaching certification with the John Maxwell team. He has a long resume, as do the ladies in the house. But allow me to conclude by saying he's really passionate about drawing people out of their comfort zones and leading them to personal success that is replicable. David, it's great to have you here today. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Musha. What an honor. Great to be here among you, and thank you for the invite into this session.
Fantastic. If you want to connect with David as well, you can find him on LinkedIn. We've shared the link to each of our panel so that you can connect with them apart from our conversation today. So, we're talking about psychological safety, and I always like to ease us in with really a reflection on the topic at hand and why it's something that we should speak about. David, let me start with you as I brought you on last. In your own
Yeah.
words, what is psychological safety? And why
Well,
is this important?
thank you. Thank you so much, Musha. I think if I was to use my own words, and you defined it very well, it's being in that space where your team knows that no matter what issues they raise, what concerns they have, even just the uncertainty of knowing something, that they will not be victimized. That I can come to a situation and say, I'm struggling with this, or I don't understand this, or I'm unsure about this. Um, that and they will not be victimized or judged for that. And so it's a space where everybody feels safe to come out with their concerns or questions or lack of knowing. That's my perspective of it. Why is it
Yeah.
important? I think innovation and collaboration within teams is hinged on psychological safety. maybe riveted, not even just hinged, because the moment people do not feel like they can challenge and they can ask questions, mistakes start to happen. And so we can
Yeah.
live in a space of perpetual error, perpetual underperformance. And for me, I think that's many organizations in our part of the world, perpetual underperformance, because nobody can call out the leader. Nobody can call the other out, because if I call you out, then I'm making you look bad. And if I make you look bad, then now we're not going to be able to work well together. And I think psychological safety then allows teams to innovate, allows people to collaborate better, allows people to get the best value. I call it optimize the
Mm,
output that they can generate.
mm. I love that. Psychological safety helps us to optimize. Goodness, I'm swallowing my words this
Big
afternoon.
lower word, big lower word.
Allows us to optimize. I really like that, to optimize. Pendo, your thoughts on the same. How would you, in your words, describe psychological safety, and really, why is it for you that this is something important?
Well, my response might not go further from the previous response, and it's the capacity to show up to work feeling as yourself, without the fear of being judged, without the fear of making mistakes, of asking questions. You're in a space where you feel safe to express yourself, of course, in a way that works in that environment. So this is that capacity to be able to be yourself without the fear of judgment and reprimand. So that's how I would summarize it. And as said, it is critical in an organization to be able to have psychological safety, because we are managing mistakes, we are managing interpersonal connections, we are managing productivity, and psychological safety allows for all of this.
Yeah, I like that. I really like that. And especially the collaboration element, which both you and David have already spoken to. I don't want to steal your thunder, Maureen, but yeah, I think we forget how much we have to work together to be able to achieve the organizational goals. Maureen, same question. What would you say psychological safety is from your perspective? And I think, having worked in the kind of people space, it would be good to hear your insights. And then, why do you think it's important?
I think my definition of psychological safety is not going to differ so much from what David and Pendo have shared. It's just that feeling of being able to show up at work, admit a mistake, ask questions, and share your ideas without feeling embarrassed or judged or face any kind of retribution for it. A good example I'd say is for those who are raised by traditional African mothers. Remember when you broke a glass and you cannot tell her that you've broken a glass because you know the kind of beating that you're going to face. To me, that is the optimal lack of psychological safety. If you are in an environment that encourages psychological safety, I think you'll be able to tell your mom, I'm so sorry, I broke this glass. And to me, that's what psychological safety is, just to be able to show up and admit that you made a mistake, or you have an idea, or you have a question, and without fear of I'm going to be punished for this. There's retribution at the end of this conversation. And why it's important for teams, I think when we create space for each other to come in and share our different opinions, like David has said, it's going to optimize our teams. Like Pendo has said, it's going to create a better sense of collaboration. Innovation is going to be faster, and therefore teams succeed. That would be what I would say about psychological safety.
I love it. And I love that example you shared, being a traditional African mother myself. I'm just asking myself the question, Maureen, whether my children will come and say, I mean, I think for me, when it comes to breaking a glass, they probably would come and say, because a glass is a glass. But I suspect there are some things where they wouldn't want to come and say, right? And therefore, as a leader, the goal is to ensure that you are creating an environment
feels that they can come and speak about anything and everything, and even talk about the mistakes they've made. Because one of the things I'm learning is that the ability to make mistakes is critical for better innovation. And when we're afraid of admitting, and I think one of you spoke to even, asking for help, which also then leads to even more mistakes, right? So I think this is so important if we want our teams to grow. David, you look like you want to add. Please,
Usha,
yes, go ahead.
I actually do. I'm itching to say something. First of all, that thing is not just a mother's thing; it's a
It's
father's thing,
everyone.
and it's so critical. It's so critical for us as leaders to realize this, that this problem is not starting in the workplace. This problem started at home.
Yeah,
And for many of us, by the time we're coming to the workplace, we ain't raising issues about nothing.
mm,
We are keeping the
mm,
peace. We are keeping the peace. We don't want to rock the boat. I'm getting a salary from this thing, man. I don't need to mess this thing up. I'm getting paid by this client. I don't need to call them out on their madness. So that's a big deal. So we are not even uh, just remedying it at the office. We're trying to remedy something that's deeply embedded in our culture as a people. And I think that's a starting point. That just that realization that because I owned up to breaking a window, true story. I owned up to breaking my window, and the next thing, as soon as I think before I was properly done with my owning up, I was on the floor picking myself up after a moment of darkness, having met my father at the door to welcome him with this information. And that shifted my relationship with the truth for a very
yeah,
long period of
yeah,
time. For many years, I wouldn't just come out with the truth because I didn't know how that was gonna
yeah.
go. And so there's many people already in the workplace who are saying, I'm not sure,
Mm,
because this person is a figure of
yeah,
authority, which I've already learned to
yeah.
mistrust in my short life.
I love that. I love that. And so, that speaks to the idea that some of the challenges we're seeing in the workplace are deeply rooted in what's happening in our homes, right? And I think that's a really important reflection. Wow. Already the conversation is lit. I'm enjoying it so far. Let me take a moment to say hello. I see we have quite a number of our usual guests and a few new ones. Thank you very much for joining today. We are delighted to have you here with us. Steffi, thank you very much for joining. She's tuning in from a sunny, thankfully, Nairobi. Steffi, it's great to have you here with us today. We have Emmanuel. Emmanuel, thank you for being here with us. Emmanuel's already giving a nod to my panel. Thank you very much for being here with us. I know I saw Tessie commenting somewhere. Tessie, it is great. There we go. Amazing panel. It's great to have you with us. Tessie is a member of our advisory board. Great to have you here. Tessie, Faith also commenting. Hey, panel, guys, lots of nods to my panel. Clearly, we've done it right once again this month. Guys are already ready to hear from you. Thank you for joining us, Faith. I saw, yes, Chamano joining all the way from Dubai. Thank you very much. It's good to connect with you again. Not a stranger in the PTS space. You're very welcome. So if you are here with us, do say hello. Here we go. Dr. Barbara is here joining from the UK. Great to have you here, Dr. Barbara. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you are here, say hello so that we can give you a shout out. Pendo, I want to come to you. I want to think about things from a psychological perspective. And I want to talk about something that's really important within our organization and something that we're really passionate about at PTS. So, what happens to employees' mental health and productivity when there is no psychological safety? So, when I do feel afraid to speak up, to push back, to ask questions, to admit the mistakes I've made, where I'm, covering my mistakes and trying to protect myself. What would you say is the impact on employees' mental health, well-being, and productivity?
That's a very good question. Starting from two factors here. One, we spend 3/4 of our awake time at work. So whatever is happening at work really impacts how we view ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. We also have to look at, as David and Maureen have mentioned, that experience where you've broken something at home and the fear that you have when your parent comes in and how you're going to explain that. And that translates to the workplace as well. Whenever you're in a space where you cannot freely express yourself, you're looking at a state where you're managing stress constantly, and you're not looking at positive stress here, we're looking at the distress. We're constantly managing that. We're looking at anxiety developing eventually. We're looking at starting to develop self-doubt, where you're questioning yourself and your capacity to deliver at work. So this eventually, we do not like to look at it, but it eventually affects the productivity in the workspace. So whenever you're in a space where there's no psychological safety, this means that even applying for a sick leave looks like something vain, something that you should be able to sit through. Saying that I'm not sure how this is done, you're not able to express that. We're looking at more mistakes bound to come up. So psychological safety or the lack thereof exposes someone to a lot of distress, anxiety, constant self-doubt, confidence going down, and this sadly does not only end at the workplace. Sometimes we see this also applying in the individual's personal life. So the impact is not as small as you would think it looks like. It's a domino effect that affects the individual, the productivity in the workspace, but also in their personal lives.
Yeah. And I think that it's something that can really have a ripple effect, because when we are in a space that is not great from a work perspective, it actually spills over into all the other facets of our life, right? And it affects our ability to do everything else. So thank you very much for sharing that insight, Pendo. Maureen, let me come to you. Thinking about the people and culture space. You're a young leader working in that space. How do you see these generational expectations influencing psychological safety in the workplace? When I think about the employee today, right, possibly I would categorize you and Pendo in a similar age bracket, and maybe myself and David in a different age bracket. But thinking about the employee of today,
Feeling
thinking about the
profile.
employee of yesteryear, where organizations have this range, because maybe more and more it's the Davids and I who are bringing the baggage of not telling our parents about the mistakes we've made. Whereas perhaps the younger generation, they have no issue talking about it. I don't know. Maybe for them, it's more how they express themselves. But what do you see as far as these generational expectations and how they influence psychological safety in the workplace?
Thank you, Mucha. And just to echo what Pendo has said, I think if psychological safety is absent in the workplace, even in your physical, personal life, you begin doubting yourself in areas where something as simple as applying for sick leave becomes a whole big deal. And in the workplace, especially for these generational expectations, we'll just use the classification that you used here. Put you and David as part of the older generations in the workplace.
Yes.
And I'll put Penda and myself
I'm really missing my emojis today.
Yes.
and I'll put Penda and myself as the younger generation in the workplace. So we're seeing the younger generation demanding for conversations, real-time feedback, that I want to know how I'm doing today. I don't want you to wait until it's the end of the year for you to give me a performance review, which almost always feels like a verdict. You're always given just a rating and you're told you're above average or you're meeting expectations. So the younger generation are they're demanding for conversations every day. Tell me how I can be better today. Don't wait for me to get to December to give me that rating. And then you have the older generation who are more used to or have grown in the tradition of not challenging authority, like David was saying, where even
Yeah.
for our parents, you would not challenge their authority. So you'll almost always wait for the December performance review. And even when that comes up, they do not challenge that verdict. It's
Yeah.
final because to them, challenging that feels like it's not okay to do it. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a clear distinction between the younger generation and the older generation. And in people and culture, I think, and on for all leaders, because I think everybody does show up as a leader in the organization in their different levels, whether younger or older. We all need to hold space for each other to create that willingness to hear feedback from the older generation, and for the older generation to feel safe enough to say, can I also challenge this? Because the younger generation is already there, they're already confident enough. I think it's for the older generation to unlearn that authority can indeed be challenged, and actually come up and challenge and create psychological safety in their teams.
I like
Yeah.
that. I like that. Interestingly, in our conversation last month, David, I'll come to you in a minute, but I'm just reflecting on the conversation we had last month. So, in the discussion, and we intentionally ensure that our panel is diverse, right? So, both from a gender perspective and from an age perspective, because we think it's important to get multiple perspectives. So, we had a conversation about managing upwards. And this concept of the different generations came up, right? And the idea that the younger generation, the Pendos and Maureen's of the organization, are pushing back. Maybe they are asking for more and demanding for more. And one of the reflections came is that yes, as a leader managing a younger team or managing across generations, you may find yourself with individuals who are pushing back, who are asking for more, who are being a little more demanding. And it's also learning as a leader who's managing across those generations that just because someone demands for something doesn't necessarily mean they're always going to get it. And I think it's a lesson we are all learning, right? So it also means that as someone who's leading across generations, learning how to, to also push back, right, against the demand for more, and to do. And I think when we all learn how to do this respectfully, when we all learn how, or when we cultivate an environment as a leader where it's safe enough for me to say it, but also coach me on how to receive it, then we have more productive workplaces. David, let me come to you as we continue these reflections on psychological safety.
Yeah.
Looking at your experience working with various organizations, what leadership behaviors or cultural norms erode psychological safety? And how can leaders begin to dismantle some of those behaviors,
Yeah.
some of those norms, so that they can cultivate the psychological safety that enables people to thrive?
Thank you so much, Musha. And I want to connect this to something that Pendo said earlier about how you see the person. I think one of the biggest challenges is when we see people just as machines
Mm.
or as employees. You're here to deliver on something we gave you. I give you input, you churn out whatever it is you expected to churn out. I think that's the foundational cultural norm that hinders psychological safety, because then I don't pay attention to, now going back to what Pendo was saying, I don't pay attention to all the things happening around you. Now, in my coaching, I use a model that I was taught in class called coaching the whole person. Many times when we coach, especially as many of us coaches have selected certain aspects of coaching. So I'm either a business coach, I'm a career coach, I'm a growth coach, I'm a life coach. But really, you're a coach, you're a coach, you're a
Mm.
coach. And for me, I chose to focus on coaching the whole person, because all these other things are playing into how you're showing up in the workplace. You had a fight with your significant other in the morning. You had that call from the school that if they don't have school fees, if you've not paid for the bus will leave them.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
think that's one of the most interesting ones I
Yeah.
had. So, and then am I not going to pay for those days that they have gone on the
Yeah.
bus? Anyway, just so
Yeah.
so there's all these things that are happening around this person, and when they're showing up at work late, and you just say, you're supposed to be here at 8 o'clock, you're supposed to be here at 9 o'clock. Wait, hold up. You have no idea what kind of morning I've had.
Mm.
And so I think that's the beginning, that we are here to work and not to make friends. I think that's just the first thing. The next thing is blame culture. Something happens, and our first response is, who is responsible for
Yeah.
this? And that just puts us in a place where no one wants to try anything. Hence, it's that thing that costs us money, and now I'm to blame that it could cost me my job. Victimization, where we oh, this is more on the feeling side, where the employees feel like they're constantly being put down, they're constantly being accused of things, they're constantly never getting anything
Yeah.
right. And again, this is one of those things that starts at home, and when it's brought to the workplace, it just causes major problems. Trust.
Mm.
When people just can't trust, I'm not sure you've got my best
Yeah.
interest at heart. Um, and sometimes in the workplace, we are like, I'm getting ahead no matter what. So look out. So backstabbing,
Mm.
people going over each other, and leaders
Yeah.
allowing it. It's one thing when people go over each other and it comes to your attention, and you allow it. When you allow it, then it completely erodes trust. I think one of the other big ones is lack of recognition, where you do not recognize people for their contributions. People don't necessarily want a raise for their contributions. And I'm trying to think, it's Henry Haysbug, Haysbug talks about, um, he talks about the
Yeah.
motivators and
Yeah.
demotivators. And one of the things he talks about is recognition. It's not always the paycheck, it's not always a bump in my income. Just recognize that I'm the one who came up with that idea. That's enough for me. Attach my name
Yeah.
to it. And then maybe a last one, and of course, definitely not the least. There's many more. I would go with arbitrary layoffs, where I just didn't like, I don't like that person. And so I go to Maureen and tell her, Maureen, please fire so and so. We don't need them anymore. And in an organization where Maureen says, oh, okay, I guess you're the boss, you're the one who works with them closely, without any further, or even without defending them or seeking some grounds to do
Mm.
that, creates an environment where there's mistrust. How do we begin to unlearn this? First, understand that you're working with
Yeah.
people that are coming from the backgrounds that we're talking about, where they've lived this reality for a very long time and are just learning to trust the people they are close to. Begin to understand that you're working with people. And I think that comes from connecting with them. Just take time, show a little care, show a little concern for the person you're working with. Why did they come late? Before you say you are late and that has a disciplinary whatever to it, or this has been your 10th day late. Have they been coming late since the first day of work? Maybe something has shifted. What has shifted? So, taking time to connect with people and understand what they're going through, taking time to have a genuine interest to add value to people. When you're like, okay, when this person leaves and they were asked, what was your best experience with a leader? Would they say, I was the best experience they ever had? Would they mention your name as a leader?
Mm,
And I think just that interest gets people to begin to trust and deliver more value with you. But more than anything else, and I'm just going to pose with these three, and there are many others we can look at, is create an environment of
yeah,
trust.
yeah,
And whether this is with information or just with keeping your
yeah.
word, whatever you said you're gonna do, you said we're gonna do this, and you're not shifty, you're not changing the goalposts all the time. That if you said this is gonna be, someone was talking to me the other day about how they agreed on a certain basic pay, and then which was a net pay, and then later on they saw that same figure showing up as the basic pay, and they're like, so which is which, the net pay or the basic pay? And knowing that the basic pay that is the same as the net pay they had agreed on is on the contract.
Mm,
And it's one of those
yeah,
conversations that, okay, can I trust you guys really? And this was a real
yeah,
conversation they were
yeah.
having. So I think those are some of the top things that if leaders were to unlearn, they would start on the journey towards creating a
I love
culture
it.
of
I love it.
psychological
And I
safety.
really like the first point you made there, David, around the things that we need to really be mindful of and learn. Is this idea that the people we work with are people, they are human beings. I think for me, if every leader just started there would be such a transformation within organizations, right? You are working with people. And this perception we've had for very many years that when you come to work, leave your emotions at the door. It's a fallacy. It's not possible. My emotions are an integral part
Yeah.
of who I am. Now, it's true
Yes.
that I can learn how to navigate my emotions more effectively, 100%. I need to learn how to deal with the stuff I'm dealing with without having a meltdown or without throwing a tantrum in the office, 100%. But expecting me to get that news that my child has been left by the bus because the fees for the bus have not been paid, and then come and act as business usual, it's not
Yeah.
realistic, right? It's not realistic. And
Mm.
I think for me, this is pivotal. And this is why, at PTS, we say emotions are at the heart of everything. Emotions are the heart of everything because we're working with people. And one of the sayings coined at 6 Seconds, the organization we're part of, the global organization we're part with, is people. Emotions drive people. People drive performance. So if you want to get to the performance, you need to tackle the emotions. Wow. Faith says the conversation is literally simmering, and I agree with you, Faith. There's really great energy in the room. Let me say hello to a few more people. Shem, thank you very much for joining us today. It's great to have you online. Ruth, thank you for joining us. Ruth says, great panel. Um, and then I think I saw Marianne Matete, who's logging in from Machakos. Great to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. We've had a couple of comments that have come through. So Esther says, I love the example that was shared by Maureen. Clearly explains psychological safety very well, and to support David, because that is what happens in our offices. I think that, yeah, we are people before we are anything else. Dr. Barbara says, I would recommend All That We Are, a book by Gabriella Braun. I think let's show that on the screen so people can see it. All That We Are by Gabriella Braun. It echoes what David is talking about. So if you wanted a book to add to your reading list, here's a great one. Thank you very much, Dr. Barbara, for that insight. So as we continue with our conversation, I want to, stay with you, David. Let's talk about how we integrate psychological safety into organizational culture. So it's not as an initiative, but it is part of our daily operations. And because you've spoken quite a
Yeah.
bit about trust, I'm wondering if
Yeah.
there's a trust element there. But how do we integrate this psychological safety into so that it's part and parcel of our culture? And I want to stay with you because I feel like it's almost a continuation of what you were already sharing, and perhaps you could just add a little more before I come to the ladies on the same question.
Thank you so much, Musha. Your intuition is flowing. Um, So, engagement. We need to create in the workplace more opportunities to engage with one another for anything but work.
Mm.
Whether that is lunch with each other, where we have the rule number one, no shop talk, or it's drinks in the evening, or it's breakfast sessions periodically, where we really can just come and connect with each other beyond
Mm.
work is a great starting point. If leaders would have moments where they have maybe 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes one on one catch ups with their team members just to understand who they
Yeah.
are. If you're hiring anyone new, try this. Just one of your questions during the orientation must be, where do you see yourself, or what do you want to get out of this organization, or what do you want to get out of this role, so that you can really hear their heart. And probably another question has to be, um, beyond this job,
Mm.
what do you want to get out of your
Mm.
life, so that you can hear them, and you can hear your how much time they are with you, number one, whether you can even offer them what they're looking for and hoping for, so that you're prepared and you can also prepare them. What I was talking about, adding value to them, so that every assignment, every role, every engagement is moving them closer to what they want to
Yeah.
achieve at a personal level. And they know that as they execute for you, they're executing for
I love
themselves.
it.
So just that understanding and that just building of connection beyond the job.
Mm.
We are here for the job. Definitely. We are here to co create results. However, who's the
Yeah.
person
We're
behind the
humans.
role? Who's the person
Mm.
behind the title? So just showing that deliberate care and concern. When you're picking up that call to call your person about that thing they have not done, what are your first words to them? Hi, how are you? What's going on? How are things going? There's this thing that we're supposed to deliver on. What's happening with that? But sadly, many times we are so unplanned as leaders. And so, as it were, that call is coming the last minute, a few minutes to the deadline. So there's no niceness left. And so sometimes, even when we're coming to the training session, or when we're coming, oh, we need a culture change, already we are at boiling point.
Mm.
Nobody is present, and nobody is seeing the time to build a culture of community and family and relationship. So I think there's a need for planning with the end in mind, beginning from the very start, when we are hiring, when we are onboarding, to create that culture of care and concern
Mm.
for our
I
team
like
members.
that.
Again, going back to the thing, we are
We're
dealing
humans.
with
Yeah, we're
people.
dealing with humans. I like that.
I
I like that.
I think another thing, maybe just
Yeah.
one more, is see team members as partners.
Mm.
When you see people as partners, you don't give assignments, you cast vision. This is where we want to go. This is where I want to take this. Where do you see yourself? With that question, you get them to determine and decide their ownership position of the assignment or the results we need to deliver. So just getting the team to own the work that we are doing is by casting
Yeah.
vision. Have you shared the goals clearly? Have you shared the objectives? Have you shown how this is connected to what the organization wants to do? Have you helped them? And sometimes that's what I say. Sometimes leadership is parenting, or more. Leadership is parenting, because no one has probably ever asked them to be accountable for anything. And now you're delegating stuff to them. They're already feeling the pressure. Am I being set up to be fired, or am I really being set up to grow? And if you have not had the conversation of how this is connected to what they want to
Mm.
achieve, or that they should have their own personal goals and their own personal vision for their lives, and they should see how that connects with what we are trying to do at this organization, then you're likely to not get their best coming from them. And so, taking time to engage with them, to understand what they want to do, to understand where they want to go, is a great starting point in integrating psychological safety into the organization. Now, how you manage that information after that then
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
critical to
Yeah.
building
Yeah.
trust, because we'll give people will give you little by little, and how you respond to that, how you engage with that,
Makes a
is going to be
difference.
critical. The first
Yeah.
being that you're actually
Listening. Yeah.
listening to what is
Yeah,
being
I
said.
like that. One of the things I always tell leaders is, first of all, you should be having regular one-on-ones with your team members. I'm always amazed at the
Mm,
number of leaders who do not have regular one-on-ones, right? So they tell the team, "Oh no, I have an open door policy. Come and see me anytime." But the truth of the matter is, in addition to having an open door policy, your team members should know that there's a regular moment where they check in with you. And then part of that regular check in needs to be moments spent on non work checking in, right? So, as part of the
yep.
agenda, before we dive into the work, it's okay, let's start by talking about how you're doing, right? Where do you need, is any support you need? What's going on with your child who's maybe gone off to uni in the UK? How are you navigating that empty nest syndrome? Or, how are you dealing with your mom who is unwell? So it's when it becomes regular cadence and the team knows that regularly I'm checking in, and I'm not checking in to tick a box, right? Faith here says there are some engagements that can only give cosmetics, ticking a box. It sounds good on paper, but practicality may be a gray area. So when we talk about checking in with people around their life outside of work, who they are, you're not doing it to tick a box, right? You're doing it because you're genuinely interested. And people can tell when
Yep.
you're genuinely interested or not.
Yep.
But I think that for me,
Yeah.
I really encourage leaders to ensure that you're having a regular check in, and part of your cadence of that check in is checking in beyond just has someone delivered on the goals. Ladies, yes,
And Musha,
yes, yes,
I
go.
just want to chime in
Yeah,
before you
yeah,
go
go
to the
ahead.
ladies. It's part of the reason this is not done, and part of the reason this is ignored by many leaders is because it's not easy
Yeah.
work. It takes a
Yep.
deliberateness. It takes deliberate planning. Now, I'm one to say openly, and I do not fear to be to be to be misunderstood. Self leadership is overrated.
Hmm.
And one of the things, just because someone is a leader doesn't
Yeah.
mean they've figured out their
Yeah.
self leadership.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's where the problem
Hmm.
is. You are just operating, you're just getting stuff done as things come. There's no plan to the way you're operating. And so that lack of
Yeah.
organization is cascading to
Yep.
your team. And so you can't get the most out of them because you're not clear where you're going. And so I think the moment you become very deliberate about what you're doing, every action is very deliberate. You begin to delegate more to your people, and you can move into a more strategic position because your team is able to deliver value.
Hmm.
They have a clear understanding of what it is they are there to do, and they have a clear understanding of what your relationship looks like and what it is they're contributing to the top line or the bottom line.
Love it, 100%. I think that this is really why EQ is so critical in these conversations. But let me not get ahead of myself. Pendo, let me come to you, and then Maureen, I'd love to hear your reflections as well. And Maureen, I think that you sit at this table really as yourself, but also giving us insight from an HR perspective, right? On how can we practicalize some of these things? How can we transition, as Faith says, from things that are just ticking a box that sound good, but the application of it is non-existent. So Pendo, your thoughts on this question, and then we'll round it off with you, Maureen.
I thank you for this, and I very much agree with what David said. And it's going to entail literally embedding this into the, I would say, bloodstream of the organizational culture. Every conversation that you're having, it has to be one that is guided by empathy. We keep saying that you need to think of these people as human beings, but you also, in addition to that, or to support that, it's to look at it as if I were on the receiving end of this. How would I have loved for this to be handled? How would I have loved for this feedback to be given, for someone to check in on me and see how I'm doing? So we have to.
Ooh, looks like we've lost Pendo there. Um, all right, I think we've lost Pendo a little. Her screen's frozen. You guys can still hear me clearly, right? I can see you moving. So
Yes.
that
Yes.
means that
Yeah.
this is what happens with technology. All right, no worries. I'm sure Pendo will come back to us. So let me move to you, Maureen, on the same question and really thinking this is not an HR initiative, Maureen. How do we make it real? How do we really? I like what Pendo was saying, this idea of it's into the bloodstream of the organization. So, how? What does that look like?
All right. I think to just echo what David said first, I think that two points stood out with me. Number one, you remember that you're dealing with people, and number two, it's trust. So, in as much as you remember you're dealing with people and you choose to listen, how then do you build that trust with your people? That they will trust you with information. Like Mucha, you give examples. They will come and trust you with the information that my mother is not doing well, I'm behind on school fees, and I'm all of these personal problems, and not feel like you're going to use them, those personal problems, against them in a
Yeah,
future instance or occurrence. So like David
yeah,
said, it's going to be a deliberate, very intentional and deliberate effort on the leader to, number one, listen, and to trust and remember that you're dealing with people. At the end of the day, you just want to be a decent human being. And now to answer the question on how can we incorporate these psychological safety mechanisms into our organizations, not just as HR, but daily. I do sit in HR, but I'd like to give the perspective from I said 3 points. Number one is the willingness to model vulnerability. That's one. See, Pendo is back.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Welcome back,
Yeah,
Pendo.
we'll come back to you in a bit, Pendo. Yeah, we'll come
uh,
back to you in a bit. Yes, Maureen.
All right. So how do we model these mechanisms into the workplace, not just as a HR initiative? Number one, willingness to model vulnerability. If a leader comes up and says that I am not able to do this, or I need your help in doing this, or let's say even a CEO comes and says, I made a mistake. I have acknowledged in front of people that I made a mistake. Something as simple as that, you would be shocked the snowball effect of what it's going to have on the organization. People are going to feel safer to communicate when they have made mistakes, when they have ideas. And something we've done currently where I'm at Tamara is we do CEO coffee chats. And it's like David said, no shop talk. You just meet the leader and they take you through what they do through a cup of coffee, how my morning was. He was in the gym. You know, that number one, reminding people that you're human as a leader and you're also fallible and that you're vulnerable. That has such a snowball effect. The second one is something I think millennials and Gen Zs in the room are going to guess this one. There's this hashtag that goes cannot relate. I don't know if you've heard of it, cannot relate. So if you cannot relate, acknowledge and validate. So, in as much as you cannot relate why someone is being the way they are, acknowledge and validate their emotions. There's nothing that is stopping you from extending grace and empathy to someone, even if you do not understand. So, there's no need to tell them, you shouldn't feel this way, or I never meant for you to feel this way. Just acknowledge and validate and work through it, even if you do not understand or you cannot relate. And the third one is the willingness to seek feedback and receive feedback. I think it's a two-way street. Receiving feedback in such a way that once you get negative feedback, especially, you're not going to be all hurt and disappointed and not talk to anyone all day and your door is closed and no one can come see you for the rest of the day as a leader. And also giving feedback, not shouting at people, not shutting
Mm.
people down, but giving constructive feedback. So it's not just as HR perspective, but as leaders and as we are in the organizations, creating that space for one another with vulnerability, with feedback, with acknowledging and validating emotions. It goes a long way in creating psychological safety.
Oh my, I love that. Thank you so much, Maureen. And I was just reflecting on the last point you made about feedback. And I was having a conversation with one of our clients, one of our key clients recently. And we were talking about feedback. And, she mentioned the fact that it's something they're really struggling with as an organization. And this is a global organization. And so there's, different cultures within the team. And one of the things that we identified, or one of the things that we agreed, is that often when we teach people about giving feedback, we focus on the tools, right? So, for example, a very famous tool for feedback is the SBI tool, where you give the situation, then the behavior, then the impact, right? And the idea is you root the conversation around that. And we even talk about how making sure you must make sure you give I statements. So people are armed with the tool. But one of the things we fail to talk about is the emotions underlying this feedback, both giving and receiving it. And the truth of the matter is, if we aren't, and again, it goes back to an earlier point that I think, David, you made around self leadership. If I am not able to manage the emotions that are triggered when feedback is given to me as a leader, it's going to be very hard for me to receive the feedback. Likewise, if I'm not able to manage perhaps some of those emotions that arise when I have a challenging situation with a member of my team, if I'm not able to manage that effectively, then no matter how well I know the tool, my feedback's not going to be effective. So I think that giving and receiving feedback is so critical if we want to cultivate psychological safety. I think it's something that's really important, and it requires us to learn that element of self leadership. Understand, when a member of my team disagrees with me, what is my default response? All right. So how do I navigate that so that I don't put people off from disagreeing with me? And I think that's really critical. Pendo, it's good to have you back.
Really
Technology
sorry
is
for
like
that.
that. No,
Yeah.
no, technology is like that. We totally understand. So you were talking to us about what we can do to integrate psychological safety into our culture, and I liked, a comment that you shared talking about making it part of the kind of very bloodstream of the organization. So back to you.
Thank you for that. Yes, this becomes a practice that everyone thinks about first, even before they engage. So, as I'm approaching someone to give feedback, am I thinking about how would I feel if I were given feedback in this way? So, we have to look at empathy being there all through. And then some people wonder, how do I establish authority if I keep looking at how people feel and thinking about how they feel? And you'd be shocked at how organically authority would come if people can model from your behavior, if people can see that you have the capacity to empathize. And like Maureen said, you also have the capacity to be vulnerable. And that authority just comes organically. So it's not an either or. These two can complement each other. I think this is a conversation that comes up a lot when we're talking of intergenerational differences in the workplace, which is a very interesting conversation. Often we try to pit these two generations against each other, but why can't they work together? Let's look at the
Mm,
experience from the older generation. Let's look at the new perspective from the younger generation. Why can't they work together and we bridge these gaps? So it has to go back to every interaction. Is it guided by empathy? Is it guided by wanting to establish psychological safety? And a good way to know that is, if you're on the receiving end of this, how would you have liked that to be handled?
wow. Woo, guys, you're dropping some amazing gems here. This is such a great conversation, and I really love what we are reflecting on. And I want to really echo this idea that leadership is work, right? Leadership is not just a corner office or a corner desk and authority. It is work. It requires work. And I think that work must begin with self leadership, right? Self awareness, understanding yourself as an individual. And, I really like the statement or the comment you made, Pendo, because I talk about this a lot. Because when I talk to leaders about empathy, the feedback is often, oh no, but people will walk over me. And I think people have a very poor understanding of what empathy is, right? Empathy doesn't mean that there's no boundaries. Empathy doesn't mean that there's no accountability. Empathy is, as you've said it, just asking yourself, if I was on the receiving end, how would I have liked to receive this? Right? It's putting yourself in that person's shoes. It doesn't mean you don't hold them accountable. It's just the how that makes the difference. And I think that's a really important part. And to your point, Pendo, when we are high in empathy, authority comes organically. I love it. It comes organically. And it's so true. Research shows that leaders who are high in empathy actually get more discretionary effort from their teams. People are willing to go the extra mile for leaders who are high in empathy because they know this person has my back. If I'm in a crunch, I can go to Maureen, I can go to Pendo, I can go to David. If I need to, make a detour in the morning, I know that it's just a WhatsApp and the answer will be yes, because this we have that relationship that we've built, and you find that people give more of themselves, and you have less of the engagement issues that many of us are struggling with in our organizations. So thank you very much. I think there's a few more people who've joined the conversation. Caroline Wanjiru, you are welcome. Thank you very much. Logged in from Kiambu. I think I'd said hi to Faith before. Yes. Faith says psychological safety must be woven into the fabric of daily operation and leadership behaviors, while strategy sets the course. It's culture that drives the journey. Thank you very much for your reflections there. We're talking about psychological safety and how it helps us to unlock team potential. If you're joining us now, better late than never. It's great to have you here and great to have you as part of the conversation. Do you have any questions for my panel? If you do, feel free to just share your reflections with us. Just type it in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn. We will get it here, and my panel will be able to answer your question. If your question is a generic one to anyone, just type it in. If you have a specific question to a specific panelist, you can also just indicate with your question. So do share those. I'm keeping an eye out for any questions that come as we continue with our conversation. So we touched on it already, but I want to zero in a little bit more on this idea of feedback, right? Because I think this is something that very many organizations, very many teams are really grappling with. What role would you say feedback, both giving and receiving, plays in sustaining this psychological safety? So I want to, pose that to you, Maureen, because I think you brought up this idea that in order for us to embed psychological safety, we need to think about feedback. Why is this so important, Maureen?
I think in psychological safety, we'd say feedback is sort of the mirror. That is, if you're receiving and giving feedback, how you receive the feedback is the mirror you set to your team as a leader on how they should receive your feedback. And if you're giving feedback, that's the mirror they're looking at when they're giving feedback to other team members. So I think feedback is very important, and how it is shared from a leadership perspective. Like I said, if you're sharing feedback in a way that is going to shut me down, and especially for the younger generation workforce, if you're sharing feedback in a way that you're shouting at me, you're just acknowledging my mistakes, you're not even seeing one good thing I did that day, it's just that day I'm not your favorite person, I'm going to shut down, and I'm possibly not going to get any learnings from that feedback. It's just going to be all hurt and disappointment, and I'm not possibly going to feel like I should bring my best self to work. On the other hand, if I'm giving you feedback as a leader and I'm telling you, sometimes you come off as too harsh and maybe too you don't understand that I am late for 5 minutes because I was dropping my daughter at school and I'm only
Yeah,
human. And then I tell you
yeah.
that and you tell me, get out of my office, don't come back. So
Yeah,
how you receive that feedback is the mirror
yeah,
of I will never give you feedback again.
yeah,
And this is
yeah,
exactly what you want to do with creating psychological safety in the workplace. You want to create that environment where everybody feels safe to show up to work every day as humans, as people, like David
yeah,
said. And it's very
yeah,
important as a leader and even as an individual team member, individual contributors, be very careful how you're dealing with people. And always remember, like Mucha said, emotions are at the heart of people, people are at the heart of your business. So you have to deal with emotions first. Yeah.
yeah. I really like that. I think that's really important, and I love the analogy of the mirror, right? Because as leaders, we are people. That's that saying of monkey see, monkey do, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It doesn't matter what we say, right? You could shout it from now until kingdom come that you have an open door policy and you welcome people's feedback. But if when Maureen comes and says, right, that her lateness was because she's struggling with trying to figure out how to do the drop off in the morning, which is important to her, and you rubbish it or you dismiss it or you act like that's something that's irrelevant, 100%, Maureen's not coming to have that conversation with you again,
That's
right?
true.
Which means that in the event that Maureen starts struggling even further and is starting to impact her work, she's stuck because she can't come and talk about it. She doesn't feel that she can. So I think that this is so important how we as leaders receive feedback shows our team how to do it, and how we give feedback shows our team how to do it. And I think that's really, really critical. And I think for me, this is why, as I've said already, that at the heart of psychological safety is our emotional intelligence as a leader. I see that there's a couple of questions on the comments there. I'm going to come to them in a minute. I wanted to just stay with you a little longer, Maureen, and then I want to ask Pendo this. And I think that I just really want to ask this as a segue from what we're talking about. So, as early career professionals, there's a lot of pressure to prove yourself, right? There's a lot of pressure to prove yourself. And there are a lot of these stereotypes that exist that, aren't necessarily helpful. These perceptions, we have a tendency of lumping people in these buckets, right? What are some of the practices that you've seen that you feel have been useful? And maybe let's talk about this personally, right? What has helped you as you've grown in your career to feel that safety, so that you can speak up and you can really ask for help and ask questions and push back, and all of those things we're talking about? What practically has worked for you? So I'd love to hear that from you, Maureen and Pendo. And then David, maybe, from your perspective, again, what's practically worked for you as you've grown in your career, but also maybe things that you've seen elsewhere in the organizations you've supported. But ladies, yeah, what have you seen work for you, considering the pressure that exists to prove yourself? Maureen, staying with you, and then Pendo will come to you next.
All right, thank you, Mucha. And I do agree. We do have this tendency of lumping people into buckets, intergenerational, Gen Z. I think there's always an exasperation with everyone in the new generation. Before Gen Zs, there were millennials. After Gen Zs, there's going to be a whole new generation with a whole different character. So I think for now, yes, let's call it the younger generation workforce.
Are we
And
ready
I'd
for
say,
those ones?
I don't think we are even close to. But yeah, I think for the younger generation, what has worked for me, practices daily. In a high level meeting, for example, I'll just give a personal experience. There was once we were having a high level meeting, and I was very young in my career, like the intern there, and this leader decides to introduce me. I had never had a leader introduce me to a room full of board members and CEOs.
Mm.
Just that created, unlocked a different perspective of me, of that leader. And I was able to share more and see that my input is valued. So, something as simple as when you're joining a meeting with an early career professional, acknowledge them. If they've drafted the PowerPoint for you, if they've drafted that memo for you, acknowledge them, introduce them in the meeting. Don't let them just be the wallflower and quiet throughout taking the minutes and walk out and forget they ever existed. So, just simple things that leaders can do are number one, recognition. Number two, again, vulnerability. If you show me you're human, I'll be more inclined to show you my human side as well, just creating that space. I have friends who've told me that their organizations have wellness managers, and a wellness manager is the link between you and your leader. So you feel more inclined to share with the wellness manager. You feel safe because of, I guess, the wellness manager title. And this wellness manager acts as the bridge between you and the leader. So these practices have helped them feel like they are included and taken care of, and their perspectives are heard. So I'd say that's
Mm.
some of the ways that have worked for me as an early career professional,
I
just to
love it.
feel psychological safety in the workplace. Yeah.
I love it. And you know what I love about the insights you've shared there, Maureen? These are simple things that can be done immediately, right?
Yeah.
As a
Yeah.
leader leading a team right now, listening to this conversation, in your very next meeting, you can actually introduce the person who is supporting you. And I think in this day and age, a recognition, and I think, David, you talked about this before, recognition is so critical. So recognizing that this is the person who, ensures that you stay on top of things. This is the person who helps you to put together your notes and your deck. And wow, I really think that's powerful. And I think that what's powerful about it is it's something that's immediately applicable. So thank you very much for that, Maureen.
Thank you, Mucha.
And
Just before you move to,
yes,
sorry,
yeah,
just before we move
yeah,
to
no, go,
Penda, I've just
go,
remembered there
go.
was a leader. There's this quote by Adam Grant that if you're a leader who says, "Don't come to me with problems, come with to me with solutions. So there's a leader in my circles who tells us, just come with all your problems. We will think about the problems together, and that also creates a
Mm,
shift such that I am not struggling by myself, trying to figure out what you need. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, I love that. I love that. So come with the problems, yeah, and then we work through them together.
yeah.
I like that, and I really like the other point you made, Maureen, about making sure, in addition to introducing, the second point. Now it's just escaped me. The second point you said introduce, and then there was a second point. What was the second point you mentioned?
The
On
vulnerability where leaders
Yes, that's
are
the
just
one. That's the
humanizing
one.
themselves.
That's the
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
You know, I think the challenge we have is that the perceptions of what leadership is, maybe those are some of the things we need to disrupt. You know, earlier we had a conversation some of the things that we need to shift or some of the changes we need to make. And David, you spoke to this point. I think maybe one of the things that we need to disrupt is what we see as what leadership is. Because I think in many people's minds, leadership means always having the answers, always knowing what you're doing, always being on top of things. But the truth of the matter is, there's no person who is always right? And I think it's great when leaders can be vulnerable. Pendo, I want to come to you to respond to that question, and then I want to check in with some of the questions that are in the chat.
Absolutely. This is such a good question for me because I am who I am today because of someone who decided to take me up and guide me through the career. So this is a very personal question to even add on this. And one of the ways that psychological safety was provided is by being given opportunity, that opportunity to ask a question, that opportunity to give your feedback, that opportunity to chair a certain bit of a meeting as much as you feel like it's beyond you. So you've been given opportunities to challenge yourself and become a better version of yourself. So that's one of the things I would say that has really contributed to establishing emotional safety around me. But there's also the bit on rewarding questions. Often we want to look at who is giving the right answer, but about who is asking the questions that need to be asked, who feels free to, because in some of these questions that we think are not impactful are the questions that actually make the most difference in whatever discussion is being had at that point. So rewarding that questioning process has also really been a powerful bit for me. One of the things that I kept being told is that it's okay to say I don't know. You ask something and you say, I don't know. You'd rather say I don't know than go ahead and do something and it's not the right thing. It is not helping the process at all.
Mm,
So one of the greatest lessons I've also had to learn in this process is to be able to say I don't know. It does not mean I'm not good enough. It just means that there's opportunity for me to learn. So for the younger workforce that is joining in, having that confidence to say when you don't know is one of that's a very powerful tool. Encouraging questions that allows to hear the new perspectives, but also it allows to manage certain risks. But also, in addition to that, creating opportunities. Often, when someone is joining a workforce, you feel like you're not sure of what you're doing, you're not sure of how things work here, you want to put your best foot forward. So, being given that opportunity actually empowers you to be able to grow in that space. Personally, in my experience, those three things have been the most impactful.
mm, I
Yeah.
love that. And I think the being able to say I don't know is a critical one for all of us. And when we work in spaces where it's okay not to know, not to have all the answers, and it goes back to what Maureen says, when we model that as leaders, right, we give people
Mm.
the authority. We allow people to do the same, to replicate. So thank you very much for those insights. Our comments are yeah, they are flying. So let me come to some of the questions. We talked a little bit about empathy. This is something that we mentioned, and there's some questions around this. There's a couple of questions here that are related. So I'm going to share both of them. So Faith, no, that's not the one. Here we go. Jerry says, as a leader, how do you avoid being taken advantage of for being too empathetic? At what point do you start demanding of someone who is not delivering because of family or personal reasons. So this goes back to this idea of being empathic, right? And then Jerry also goes on to say, as a leader, how do you handle non-performance over an extended period of time because of family and personal issues? So I think the conversation here is, okay, in order to cultivate psychological safety, we're being more empathic as leaders. But how do you make sure that you're not allowing you've let go of accountability? How do you make sure that you still, in empathy, hold people accountable? How do you handle where someone is not performing over an extended period and the answer is because of family issues? So I'd love to bring that here. David, you're nodding, so maybe
Yeah,
I can come to you as to answer that question.
I saw that question and really liked it
Mm,
because of just some struggles I had in my career. So,
mhm.
so I worked for about 10 organizations in the first 10 years of my work life. And Maureen's eyes widened. Nowadays I like saying that in front of HR professionals because they go like, "What?" And so I was the kind of guy you don't hire. Why? He doesn't stay anywhere. But over time, I came to understand with now self awareness, psychometric tests, and all that, I came to understand that part of the challenge was that I was wrongly placed.
Mm,
I wanted to deliver, I would have loved to deliver, but one, when I was being hired, was it clear what my role was supposed to be? The assumption was that it was. Number two was the onboarding done right, so that I understood what I was supposed to be using, what was available to me, and so that. Number three, did I even want to be in this role? What the ad says versus what they wanted. So one of the things I do is I'm a corporate MC. I do corporate events. I do not do weddings because what the brief said MC, but what they wanted was a hype man. And that's a typical scenario of where there's a mismatch between the job description when hiring and having the person on board. And I'm going somewhere with this.
mhm,
John Maxwell talks about the 5 levels of leadership. And in level, I think number 4, he talks about the people development level. And he breaks down the people development level to three or four levels. And he says, number 1 is, have you hired right? So, as for you as a leader, before you can even start taking some drastic actions about whether this person should stay or not, maybe they should go. But did you do your work right to describe the work you needed done? Is
mm,
that clear to you first? Then is it clear to them? In your hiring, do they have the skills that you needed for them to do the work that they need to do? That's number 2. Number 3, have you equipped them with the tools to deliver at your organization X? Because how they used to do it elsewhere, while the organizations may even be the same tire in the
mm,
market or the industry, the way those two organizations operate may be very different. The culture of the organization, and taking into account the overt culture, which is how we say we do things, and the covert culture, how we really get things done. And many organizations really paint a rosy picture about how they get things done. And then you arrive and it's a whole different story. So you're dealing with that. And so before you can even say this person is not performing, have you done your part? Is your part clear? Number 2, or number 3, number 4, have you understood why they're struggling? And this takes sitting with them and engaging with them to really understand where the problem is. Whether this is coaching or mentorship, I would go with coaching first because coaching helps even them see
yeah.
where the problem
Where the
is.
issue is.
And
Yeah.
so you get to really understand what are they really struggling with. Probably they took this job because it was the available job and luckily they got it. And so just taking time to go through that process would really help you then know I as a leader, or
I've
I
done
as a
all
leader
I
representing
can.
organization
Yeah.
X, have done
Yeah.
everything in our power to
Yeah.
get this person where they should be. Why are they
Yeah.
not performing?
Yeah.
Another thing, look at their history. Have they been performing? Do they have a history of performance? And suddenly something has shifted, a sign that there's something going on that
Yeah.
needs to be dealt with. So
Yeah.
those are some of the things I'll challenge Jerry to look at. But that doesn't mean that then you don't hold them accountable. My pushback is, before you hold them accountable, check on your side first that you've done everything. And
Yeah.
probably the beginning of it would be just even that question: what's really going on? I'm seeing
Yeah.
you struggling with this. I'm struggling with the way you're delivering. What's really
Yeah.
going on? A feedback session, not even a feedback session, almost like a fact finding mission for what's happening. Why is
Yeah.
this happening? And
Yeah.
then seeking to understand that.
Yeah.
I'm an advocate. I feel we lose good talent. We've had them on board for a year, 2 years. They understand how this organization works. And because we are not willing to take time to really dig deep and understand what's really happening, we may find ourselves in trouble. However, someone said, hire slowly, fire fast. But before you fire, just make sure
Do the
you've
diligence.
done the due diligence. Just like you do due diligence for hiring,
Yeah. Yeah.
do due diligence before you fire, to
Yeah.
ensure that you've done everything in your power to help this person move to the
Yeah.
next level.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're I was about to say in Swahili. Otherwise, you're moving. You're what you're doing is just kicking the problem to the next person.
Yeah.
You're just
Yeah.
passing on
Yeah.
challenge. And guess what they'll be saying? These people of organization X, what do you guys do there? Yet
Mm.
it was not your problem. You just inherited problems, didn't understand them and deal with them, and now you're passing them on to the next person. And sometimes I feel
Yeah.
like it's just a game of musical chairs.
I agree. I agree. I really like your point that it's critical, and I think it goes back to what we've been talking about, right? It's critical as a leader to ensure you've done the deep dive. You've done what you can to try and understand what really is going on. And I think especially where you're working with someone who has performed in the past and
Yeah,
things have changed, right? So what is it that's changed? What is it that's going on? How can you support them? But I think empathy is also drawing the line in the sand and, having conversations around, yes, this is the situation. For example, the example given here was, it's a personal situation. How do we support you within that personal situation? Because at the end of the day, goals still need to be achieved, right? And I think oftentimes we're not willing to have that hard conversation because of what's going on in
yeah,
someone's life. So
yeah,
for me, the question is, how do I support you as you navigate to achieve the things that you still need to achieve,
yeah,
right? What can I do for you? How can I stand in, so that we are able to still deliver on what needs to be delivered, so that it's not a never ending process where we're just, like you say, David, kicking the can, and we're not actually
yeah,
dealing with the issue. And I think this is where, empathy for me is very much intertwined with boundaries and accountability. Maureen Pendo, I don't know if you wanted to speak to that question,
yeah,
if there's something you wanted to add.
Yeah, just to add on to what David has said, I think for Fonjeri, it's important to distinguish between creating that psychological safety and also being too comfortable. If people are too comfortable to keep bringing up the same personal issues over an extended period of time, that means the psychological safety element has left the chat. You're now in an area where everybody is feeling too comfortable. Now you're being taken advantage as a leader. So, what David said, that feedback session, find out what is going on, because if things are too comfortable, it means authentic conversations are not happening. So it's important to just distinguish between creating psychological safety and also being too comfortable in your teams.
yeah.
Love
And
it.
I was just gonna add something, Musha. Sometimes empathy is letting you know that it's gonna be pressure for the next 6 months. Do you
Yeah.
really want to still be in this space? Because based on
Very
what we need
true.
to achieve, remember, we're all here to co-create results.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
reality may be, uh,
This is
it's
not
gonna
the
be
space.
rough.
Yeah,
Uh,
this is not the
do you
space.
still
Yeah.
want to be here? Because if you're gonna be here, then we need to see you show up. Despite everything
Yeah.
that's happening, we'll help you navigate through that. But we still need a resource holding on to this part of this initiative. That may be the
Yeah.
empathetic thing to do, and you can just say, you know what, let me take a break. Let me come
Yeah.
back when
I
I
love
can
that. I
yeah,
love
plug in.
that. I love that. You know, one of the conversations that came up, Pendo, I think you want to share something, so I'll come to you in a bit. One of the conversations that came up in our annual mental health conference earlier this year is a conversation around grief and how the person who goes to bury their loved one is often not the same person who comes back to work, right? So, how do you extend empathy for someone who's come back shattered? Their world has just, shifted in a way that's just undescribable. And the truth about grief is that we all navigate grief differently. We all feel pain differently, right? How do you do that? And I like that conversation, David. And I think it again, what you said, Maureen, are we having authentic conversations? Are we being real about what's happening, right? Where we're having a conversation about what do you need to be able to navigate this period of grief, right? And determining what does that look like? Is that support we can provide? And I think this is really what's critical is the kind of conversations we're having. Because if we're having conversations where we're just putting a plaster on a gaping wound, that's not a solution for anyone. Pendo, did you want to add something to this?
Yeah, absolutely. And it actually goes in line with what you just said. One thing I like to say is we have two hands and they only go as far. So we also have limitations to how much you can support someone. Now, I want to mention the three L's of psychological first aid: look, listen, and then link. It gets to a point where the support that you want to give is beyond what you are able to provide, but you can link them to someone, whether this is a financial advisor, this is a therapist, a wellness coach, someone who is able to guide this individual through this process. Of course, some of the points that have been mentioned, are we looking at a genuine conversation? Are they being heard? These are this
Oh
experience.
my,
I think I'm
have we
having
lost
some
you, Pendo?
connection challenges, and I'm really sorry for that. I'm not sure what is happening today.
We lost you for a minute, but you're back. Carry on. And you were saying something so
For
profound and
some
important.
for some reason today, this is supposed to be the best space to have this meeting, but it's working against me. So I'm not
Oh,
sure
it
what is
happens.
happening.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
No, don't worry about it.
But
Yeah.
yeah, in conclusion of it, what I'm saying is the linkage bit. Sometimes
I
the
love
support that this individual needs is beyond you. So are you able to link that
it.
person? Yeah.
I think that's such a great point to make, right? So
Absolutely.
again, to echo what David says, sometimes empathy is having that real conversation about whether this is the right space for you, considering the pressure that exists. And sometimes empathy is saying, you know what? I am not in any way able to give you the support you need, but here is someone who can. I really like that. I think that's really powerful because then again, it goes back to our earlier conversation. We recognize that we're working with humans and we want to support humans. Boy, guys, can you imagine our time is almost up? I want to go quickly to
Imagine
the
that.
comments. I want to go to the comments. There was a couple of things that came in. So Caroline, no, it wasn't Caroline. So I answered. We put phase two questions together. Wanjiku Macharia, I can see that you said my question is to all the panelists, but I can't see the question. So perhaps you could share the question again, or maybe the team can help me see what the question was. All right, we commented on this already. Yeah, and Jerry, we spoke about that. There's a quick question here. I don't know if it's possible. No, I think we talked. No, we answered that one. Sorry, we answered that one. There's a comment here. Diversity does go beyond generations. It's not just an age thing, right? And indeed, it is beyond age. And I think, as I mentioned before, we always try and make sure that there's some diversity in the panel because I think it helps us to speak to some of these matters. And I think in our organizations, we need to be mindful about that. There's a comment by Dr. Dorothy about the idea that the workplace has really shifted fundamentally and a lot of employees are prioritizing their psychological well-being more than ever. And so I think this really echoes the idea of why cultivating psychological safety is important, because if you don't, you're going to have issues with turnover because people will leave, right? People do not want to work in an environment where they feel that they can't be their true selves. They can't bring their authentic self to work, right? So this is really, really critical. And yes, this idea of having a coach for yourself as a leader. And this goes back to the earlier conversation. I think Dr. Barbara mentioned, how if I have a coach, if I have a mentor as a leader, I'm modeling this concept of lifelong learning. I'm showcasing that even as a leader, I am mindful that I don't know everything, right? That I am willing to learn. And that models the behavior we want to see. And that's part of this idea of self leadership. Again, Dr. Dorothy says, I agree that emotional intelligence plays an important role in leadership. As the world is evolving, so does organizational dynamics, and employees do care about their psychological well-being. I think that this is something that we can emphasize again and again and again. There's a question from Faith. I know we're down to the wire, so I'm going to just ask you to share your thoughts on Faith's question. And I think what we can do is we can also link it to your final parting shots.
Yeah.
When we invited these guests, one of the things I mentioned is really the genesis of this EQ Lunch and Learn. I've been working in the space of emotional intelligence for a number of years now. And one of the things that became evident to me, we started the Lunch and Learn through COVID, and we've continued beyond COVID. I think one of the things that became evident to me is that, very many of us don't actually understand the criticalness of emotional intelligence, right? So I always like to say emotional intelligence is not just another skill that you need to add to the plate. It is the plate upon which all these other skills lie, because everything that we've talked about today, for me, is rooted in emotional intelligence. And hence why we have these EQ Lunch and Learns, to help you to see how pivotal this skill is of emotional intelligence and how important it is for you to build your EQ capacity. And so as we close, I'm going to share this question. And as you answer the question, you can then also share your parting shot panel, because wow, we're really, really, there's so much. I wonder if we might need to come back and do another psychological safety part 2, because there's still some
Part two,
other
yeah.
questions. A lot of guys here are really saying they love Pendo's 3 L's. Look, listen, link. I think there's some real resonance with that. But yeah, there's a question here. How can you address the perceived favoritism from a leader in a respectful manner while ensuring the conversation is constructive and framed as an opportunity for correction and growth? So that's the question that's on here that we haven't answered. And then there's one other question here that we haven't answered. What are some practical ways HR leaders can consistently create and protect psychological safety, especially in high pressure or high stakes situations?
Yeah.
So as you're sharing your parting shots, we have just a few minutes. As you're sharing your parting shot, maybe you can just very quickly touch on either of these questions. But I think that there's an opportunity for us to have another similar conversation. Maureen, let me start with you.
All right, thank you, Bucha. For the question from Faith, how can you address perceived favoritism from a leader in a respectful manner? I think the best way to approach it is always open conversation. How I would do it is just walk up to the leader, ask if you have a few minutes, and say, I noticed you're delegating a couple of projects to X and X person. Is there any way I can help? Is there any way you feel like my capabilities are not meeting what you would need for this project? And how do you think I can improve to plug in? I think that's always the best way to approach it. Just go as a self improvement, because, like you very correctly phrased it, it is perceived favoritism. You do not actually know that it is favoritism. It's just because you're seeing maybe that person engage more and more with the leader. So always go and approach it from a point of self development and self improvement. Just ask directly, what do you think I can improve to support you better? And chances are you will get the correct answer and practical insights. Moving on to the question from Wanjiko, and some practical ways HR leaders can consistently create and protect psychological safety. I'd say one of the ways is modeling psychological safety themselves. So you find that organizations, like David said, organizations are always saying, this is how we do things. Then once you land there, it's a different ballgame. So if the HR leaders are the ones who are modeling inclusivity, either through their policies, for example, if you're HR in a meeting, people and culture, you notice women are being interrupted more in meetings. Why not bring it up to the leader and say, I noticed you're interrupting women in meetings. How can we change these dynamics? For example, noticing cultures where people have been raised not to question the status quo. If I give an example, here in Kenya, you find that there are very conservative cultures. People don't want to ask questions simply because of the culture they've been raised. Why not flag that as a HR representative and tell the leader, how can we change these dynamics? I think those are some of the practical ways that HR leaders can promote
Awesome.
psychological safety. Yeah.
Awesome. And your parting shots as we close our conversation today.
And okay, my parting shot. I think this has been an insightful conversation, Mucha. Thank you once again for inviting us. And the diversity, like you said, in this panel has been great. Parting shot is that psychological safety is becoming more and more important by the day. We've seen companies like Google are now doing this project Aristotle that has shown teams with high psychological safety are the better performing teams. There's Airbnb that is currently running a project on psychological safety, and they have seen, I think, a 24% improvement in their returns. So it's no longer just a buzzword. It's no longer just something that people say. It's something that is increasing revenue for companies, for organizations, and making organizations a better place to work. So it's good to note, as the leaders who have joined us today, something you can promote in your organization that is going to go a long way in ensuring organizational success. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I think as I echo this, the response around what HR leaders can do, I've put a QR code. We've put a QR code on the screen. In 2 weeks' time, we have a workshop for HR leaders. And so if you are in HR or if you have an HR manager you feel would benefit from this workshop, well, we're going to be talking about cultivating that psychological safety and linking it to the mental and emotional well-being of teams, as earlier mentioned by Pendo. Then just check that out. Check out the website for more details on the same. David, let me come to you. Any reflections on the questions, if you want to add to what Maureen already said, and then your parting shot as well? And I've just showcased or highlighted what Njeri is saying, that really HR should support leadership capabilities, accountability, and have zero tolerance for bullying. So thank you, Njeri, for your reflections on what HR can do as well. David,
And
over to you.
thank you so much, Musha. And I want to pick up from what Jerry says. I think HR, this is to answer Wajiko's question, I think HR should stand as a referee, but also advisor in the workplace. I think for many employees, standing from a standpoint of employees, one of the greatest hindrances to psychological safety is the perception, and I use this very carefully, that HR is more for the organization than for
And
the
for the
team.
people.
I think HR becomes an asset to the organization if they can help the team understand the organization and position themselves properly to benefit from everything the organization provides, but also to be able to help translate team language to the organization, while also being able to translate and break down what the team is trying to say to the organization. Because I feel
Yeah.
for many HR practitioners, sadly, so it feels like they are more on the side of the organization, and it
Yeah.
possibly comes from even the way the organization manages or engages with
Yeah.
HR. Going
Yeah.
back to what Jerry is saying, for who are you here for? We are the ones who pay you. But the truth
Yeah.
is, HR is there to ensure that this relationship works.
Yeah. Thank you.
Otherwise, everyone will just do
Hmm.
what they do.
I
So
love
I
it.
think that's a big
Yeah.
one there. How
And
can we
your
address perceived
mhm.
favoritism? I would say um, put it right across. Create an environment when Maureen talked about feedback. Create a culture of feedback, and feedback doesn't always have to be a taboo word. I think feedback has become like we need to talk, especially from a lady to a jama. That always has a different. Um, I've got some feedback already. Uh,
Hmm.
Barriers up. I think feedback needs to be both positive and constructive, and a good starting point would be positive feedback. To
Hmm.
navigate that question that Faith was asking there, um, if we can present it as this is what I'm noticing, again, starting that culture of vulnerability. It feels like you're always giving Maureen work. Why does it feel like you're always giving Maureen the nice work? I also would like to show up. And you see, I'm just saying what I'm feeling, just like the way the question, that the way Faith asked it, perceived. So it feels like it's my feeling, it's me. It's not, I'm not challenging you, I'm not accusing you, I'm just saying it feels like. Then I'm giving you a chance to defend yourself. My mentor calls it giving you rope to either hang yourself or pull yourself out of that hole. My parting shot. I think one of the great ways for leaders to create environments of psychological safety is to first begin by understanding themselves. Self awareness is such a powerful tool. The day I discovered that I am like this because this is my personality, it really freed me to engage the way I engage. That's why I'm engaging in this session like this. This is who I am. Deal with it.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
but also being present enough to say, but I'm also conscious not to trip you up in my being me if you tell me. So I'm
Yeah.
open to you telling me
Yeah.
that I'm in that space. So self awareness for me is a
Love
great
it.
starting point, even for emotional intelligence.
I love it. I love it. And I like Jerry's comment here that we need to talk isn't a psychologically safe phrase, whether that is as a boss to a leader to your team member or as a boyfriend or girlfriend to your partner. It's a very loaded statement.
It's a very loaded statement.
Thank you very much,
In the
Jerry.
same category as 5 minutes. Give
We've
me five
enjoyed
minutes.
your interaction and your comments. Pendo, last but not least,
Yeah.
your thoughts. You can feel free to comment on the questions if you wish, and then your parting shot.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me start by giving my comments on the questions, although I know Maureen and David have done the most on the two. And one, on the first one on perceived favoritism, I like that there's the word perceived there because that means that it's the way you have experienced it. Sometimes it takes, or rather, it helps to take a step back and evaluate, am I looking at this situation objectively? Could there be a personal experience that is also contributing to how I'm feeling right now? So there's that room to do that. And then in addition to that, sometimes it comes from a point of we've not been empowered on how to have these conversations, especially in a workspace. We do not know how to bring it up with an in charge or a superior. And this is where I always say it does not hurt to research, to ask, and to also practice. It does not hurt to be in front of your mirror that morning and rehearse how you're going to say it if that's all it takes for you to communicate it. It's better as compared to not saying it at all. So there's no shame in practicing, there's no shame in inquiring and asking someone, consulting, if it's going to guide you to communicate in a healthy way. That's what I would add on that
Love it.
bit. The second question was on the HR's bit. I think David and Maureen have expounded on that as much as they could. HR has been, for some reason, has been seen as for the organization as compared to for the people. And we want to work towards them being at the middle of the two. Can they help to manage the relationship between the people versus the goals of the organization? So that's the opportunity that we might want to make the most out of. As a parting shot,
Fantastic.
we are already a work people. We already work. We already know that in workplaces we can achieve psychological safety. So any organization that is not hopping onto that trend is actually doing itself to failure. It's about time that we start thinking about these things and implementing rather than looking at them as just concepts that are not practical in the day to day world. So, yeah, that's how I'd like
Oh,
to end this bit. I'm so grateful for this
wow.
opportunity. This has been
Wow.
a great conversation.
It has been phenomenal. Maureen, David, Pendo, thank you so much for your insights. We've gone over and people are still here. You know when you've gone over time and people are still tuned in, that the conversation is lit. Not only are they still tuned in, they are still commenting as well. So thank you so much for the insights you've given. And I really want to encourage you, if you are tuned in and this topic of psychological safety is something you feel is important for you as an individual to bring to your organization, check out our training that's coming up on the 11th and 12th of September. It's designed for HR or people professionals whether you're from a wellness perspective or even from a learning and development perspective. And what we're looking at, the first part of this workshop is looking at you, going back to the point that David made, that everything starts with self-leadership. So we're going to spend some time looking at you. This concept of, we've not talked about it today. That's why I say maybe we need to come back and do another psychological safety. But there's a concept of creating psychological safety within. I recently wrote about this. If you go to my LinkedIn newsletter, I talked about this idea that psychological safety actually starts internally. And so in this mental health training, we're going to be looking at that. How do you create safety for yourself? How do you ensure well-being for yourself? And then we'll start talking about how to do that in the workplace. So scan the QR code, reach out to us if you have questions. But allow me to close by just thanking my panel once again. You guys have been phenomenal. Thank you so much for your time.
Been an honor.
David, thank you, Maureen, and thank you, Pendo. And indeed, as Faith, Faith, you've put it so well. Faith has put it so well, a well-spent lunch hour. I couldn't agree more. It's been a phenomenal conversation. Thank you very much to my panel. If you're new to connecting with PTS, as I say goodbye to the panel, if you're new to connecting with PTS, follow us on our socials. We love talking about all things emotional intelligence, and we want to provide you with the tools that you can utilize so that you can thrive in your workplace. We are at PTS Africa across LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. And you can also follow me personally, Mucha Mlingo, across LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Diarize the last Wednesday of every month. We are always here talking about how you can utilize or build this EQ muscle. Our topic next month is gratitude. September is my birthday month, and every September we always talk about some element of gratitude and why it is such a critical thing for you to be able to thrive in the workplace. So diarize that, 12:30 East Africa time, last Wednesday of every month. So that would be the last Wednesday of September. In October, we're talking about culture, and we are partnering with a very dear friend of PTS, and we're going to have a conversation about culture. So that's our topic for the month of October. And then in November, we are wrapping up the year with a conversation about reflecting. And we will have our resident end of year person, Tessie, who's always in that panel, joining us once again as we talk about how to close the year out in such a way that we really give nod to our successes. We have a look at where we've dropped the ball and we prepare ourselves for the new year. So last Wednesday of every month, there's always great insights for you. If you want to learn a bit more about emotional intelligence, you can also join us for our EQ training. We have a series that we call EQ 101, and we would love to have you join us. Every quarter, we have a different topic. In the last quarter, we looked at self-leadership, and we're going to be looking this quarter at emotional balance. And so later this month, on the 26th of September, is our next EQ 101. So again, check it out, go on the website and have a look. And if you have any questions, you can connect with us. It's an online 90-minute session. So today we've had people joining us from everywhere as far as the UK. So you can join us for that from wherever you are. Goodbye for now. Thank you so much for sharing your lunch hour with us. Next time, tag a friend and bring them along.